Hello everyone, hope you're all having a nice day, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at Arceus Vstar partners, or more specifically, we're going to be looking at a tier list for Arceus Vstar partners, in terms of a competitive viable deck, in terms of maybe a lower tier deck, and in terms of sort of a rogue deck that you can build pretty cheaply. So if you have any favorite partners, let me know down below, and if I missed any one out, then please do inform me. But without further ado, we'll get into the video. So, Arceus Vstar in an overview is an amazing V-Star Pokemon that will provide acceleration to V Pokemon. It has easy 2-hit KO setups with Trinity Nova, doing 200 damage, or 170. Yeah, no, not 170, 180, I should say, if you have a double turbo, because your damage output will be reduced by 20. So, still doing 180 though, which is still pretty good. Starbirth is an amazing ability that allows you to just guarantee a card at any point, or two cards, I should say, at any point in the game. So you can threaten turn 2 Trinity Nova very easily, since you can use it to find your Turbo energy. You can use it to find Boss's Order, a stadium that you need, maybe. It's just a very strong ability. It's also got the added benefit of being a 280 HP 2 prizer, which is amazing. It's not like a tag team where it's giving up 3 prizes, it is only giving up 2. There is some potential for control. We're not going to go into that into today's video, but I will mention in the future. But the ability is very good at finding control pieces from the deck, so crushing hammers and stuff. So I could see this being a good control partner. And then now, lastly, VMAXs that were once too awkward to power up can now be done much easier, allowing for greater diversity in the meta. Basically, this will be the best time to play your favorite V. So the whole point of today's video is not just to showcase a tier list, it's to showcase all the different partners you can play with Arceus. Necessarily uncompetitive or not so, but that was a messy sentence. But basically, it's a way of seeing all those VMAXs that you used to think, oh, maybe that could be good, but there's no real way to power it up properly. Or maybe the ways that have been able to power it up are too slow, like using Stage 2 Hydreigon or Rillaboom, for example. Well, now, Arceus V-Star really opens the door to a lot more decks. So the most tier 1 potential, I think, in terms of partners for Arceus, comes in the form of Ice Rider, Galarian Moltres, Hoopa, and Centiskorch. So Ice Rider Calyrex is already an amazing deck in the format, but what really sets it apart is Max Lands doing 250. Now 250 doesn't seem that unassuming, but then we factor in the fact that we now have Choice Belt, we now have a more consistent way of powering up Ice Rider in the form of Arceus if you really want to. So you have Starbirth ability that will allow you to find, Melanie and Choice Belt and stuff like that. So you can essentially play Melanie in the same deck as well. But the reason why I'm talking about Max Lance earlier is because Choice Belt allows you to hit 280, which is a 1-hit KO on basically any other V-Star Pokemon. In the future, we may see something like a Wailord V-Star, hopefully, or a Snorlax V-Star, which have northwards of 300 HP, potentially, but right now 280 is the cap, so Max Lance would seem like a pretty solid bet. You're probably playing double turbo energy, I would assume, so Ride of the High King is a bit much easier to use, and you can sort of negate the downside of having to minus 20 with the double turbo by playing a Choice Belt, so the synergy's all there. I'm just not sure yet if Ice Rider really needs Arceus. I don't think the deck is going to be bad. If you want to play both of them in the same deck, it seems good enough, but I don't think it'll be necessary, so to speak. But it does seem like as tier 1 potential. Galarian Moltres V is here purely because it's a very easy to power up attacker already with Darkflame Wings ability, but now it's just you can search your deck for 3 Dark Energy and attach them to Galarian Moltres. It's amazing. It's honestly really scary in some regards because it's not just Arceus V-Star that has a Trinity Nova-like attack, it's the V as well that can search for basic energies. Admittedly, it doesn't do any damage and it costs a double turbo, but the V can still power up Galarian Moltres. And so you can use Aurora Burn very efficiently, and you can also pair this out with Choice Belt to knock out other Pokemon evolving Vs, and then obviously if a weakness on Mew, seems really good. Hoopa V is sort of like a slightly more roguish variant of Galarian Moltres V, but it does open the door to be able to hit both Dark type and Psychic weakness. So if maybe Urshifu ever really cropped up again to try and take advantage of the weakness to fighting that Arceus has, then Hoopa V could sort of counteract that by playing Hoopa V, really. It allows you to get a 1-hit KO on those Urshifus. And it is a fusion strike Pokemon, which does mean you have access to stuff like Alessa Sparkle if you really wanted to, and Fusion Strike Tablet, so you can just hit from bigger numbers with Shadow Impact. So a pretty cool card. Scorch VMAX, another big one. I was debating if I should put Charizard up here instead of Scorch, but the more I thought about it, the more I think Scorch has slightly more potential than Charizard, just because GMAX Centifurner does 40 more damage for each Fire Energy attached to this Pokemon, and then you can attach Fire Energy from the stockpile to him as well after that. So obviously the big thing about Arceus Vstar is you can accelerate 3 Fire Energy from your deck to another Pokemon V, so we can find 3 energy attached Scorch. We can manual a 4th one, we can then attach a 5th one from the discard pile the next turn. You know, there's like many ways we can power this up, and we also have like the new Magma Basin, so Scorch seems like a really good pick. So tier 2 potential, I've got some side notes on it here, saying most of the existing decks that could receive a boost, especially Shadow Rider with a massive acceleration, and Drellodon since it can wall out double Turbo Energy, and attackers like Whimsicott have the bonus of being fellow 2 prizers, as well as good weakness coverage on fighting types being played to stop Arceus. Zard, Star, and Zacian are easy to set up thanks to Basin and Saucer, and Zard is particularly interesting with its one-hit KO potential. So, a bunch of these over here. If you don't know what Raichu V does, it has as a first attack that allows you to switch your deck for a lightning energy and attach it to this Pokemon. It can be used on the first turn though, so that is a good option. And its second attack, you have to discard as many lightning energies as you want, but it does 60 damage for every one. So you can sort of build a deck around using Arceus to set up Flaffies. I've showcased a recent list on the channel, I think, where you just use Arceus to power up a Raichu or 2, and then you have like Flaffy in the late game, so it could be interesting. Rapid Strike Urshifu, gaining the ability to just have another way of powering up Gmax Rapid Flow without having to use Rapid Strike Energy. Maybe you play that in the Melanie build. Could be maybe a bit too clunky. Maybe it's just better just playing like the straight Urshifu variant, but it is an option that exists now. Drellodon VMAX. Skyscraper ability is great. It prevents damage done to this Pokemon by Special Energy, so decks that are running around playing, Double Turbo is the big one right now, but, other stuff like Horror Energy, for example, or Heat Fire on Scorch and Charizard will obviously not be able to hit Drellodon, so being able to play a counter deck like that's really cool. And then Shadow Rider gaining another additional way to sort of accelerate psychic energies from the deck is obviously really good. And then Zacian already pairs really nicely with Metal Saucer and stuff, so it kind of makes sense that Zacian would just be a good partner for Arceus, if nothing else. And then Whimsicott V-Star. I'm still not that sure about Whimsicott, but I've seen like enough people talking about why Whimsicott could be really good, and that's mainly centered around its attack Tricky Wind that allow you to basically prevent your opponent from playing Pokemon tools and Special Energy. We've already talked a lot in this video about how good Special Energy is and choice belts and stuff, so Tricky Wind, really solid. Charizard V-Star coming in there with Explosive Flare doing 230 damage, yep. If it has any damage counters, obvious synergy with like Magma Basin, and so you can sort of like allocate your energy a bit better with Arceus, so you don't have to put 3 on one Charizard, you can put like 2 on another Charizard and 1 on another one, if that makes sense, and then like play Basin and manual attachments and make it a lot easier. And then of course Star Blaze doing 320, slap a choice belt, and then you're doing like 350. Anything goes down at that point. So really strong finisher, and that's kind of it for tier 2. I don't think these will be strictly like amazing decks, but these could definitely like rise up as some of the better variants of Arceus. So tier 3 potential are like, these are more like potential archetypes that could fly under the radar to start with, but as more people experiment, they might find these can compete with some tier 1 decks, and maybe even sneak into tier 2 somewhere down the line. I'm looking at you, Dragonite. Arceus doesn't always have to be based around Trinity Nova. Starbirth is a good enough on its own ability with a 2-2 line, so decks like Gengar Hammers, for example, could pop up. So what I mean by like a 2-2 line of Arceus is where you just play, a 2-2 line of Arceus, and then like 2 or 3 double Turbo Energy, and then you just use Arceus as kind of like a support engine for the deck. So you have a consistent guaranteed boss whenever you want it, or a consistent guaranteed energy hammer attachment stadium. We talked a little about control earlier, so that's kind of what I'm getting at here, is we could have some like Gengar where you don't need to rely solely on Houndoom. You could use Arceus maybe to charge it up, or Arceus just to find single strike pieces that you need. But generally, these are like pretty okay ideas. I like the idea of Lapras, especially since, well, Lapras and Blastoise, because of like all the Charizard that's probably going to come with this format. And, Magma Basin will spark a lot of people trying to experiment with cards like NTV and stuff. So I think playing a water type is not a bad shout. Cards like Delmise VMAX and Venusaur, these are more like looking to the future, I think. But Darkrai Vstar, probably going to be an amazing deck in the future, and that's weak to grass. So playing something like Delmise and Venusaur now does seem kind of smart. I would like to build Delmise at some point. Whether it's the Arceus variant or not is another matter, but it is certainly a good way of powering it up. Dragonite V is definitely got a lot of people talking because Dragon Gale, 2 Water and a Lightning does 250. You have a choice about, you're doing 280, it's knocking out all the other V stars. Really good attack. Maybe it'll take like another rotation before Dragonite V is a lot more dominant, or we have more dominant V stars. But I think Dragonite V is definitely hitting the right notes, I should say. And then Gengar V Max doing 60 damage for each of your opponent's V and V GX in play. GX in play obviously not relevant now in standard, but the 60 for each of V is still pretty good because obviously we can have Arceus charging up other Vs. We can have Luminion V in the format as well. So Gengar seems like a solid pick. Rayquaza VMAX probably gains its strongest buff in the form of Arceus. I think it's a great addition to that deck. And then Blissey V, kind of in a similar situation, but I would just say Blissey is kind of like the alternative to something like Zacian, maybe, where you kind of like Zacian, where you're playing the game like Zacian, but you're a little bit more tankier than Zacian, and you can play like different special energy as well. So could be good for Blissey V. I'm not sure why you'd play Blissey over Zacian. I mean, I've just answered that question, but I mean, like, I think Zacian is just a more competitive version of Blissey V, but Blissey V does have the added benefit of not being, being a colors type, I guess, so you can have like Charon's Care in your deck, but Zacian does kind of hit for weakness on Ice Rider, which will probably be really good this format, so either way, that's what I should have mentioned about Zacian, was actually the hitting for weakness on Ice Rider is a major selling point, but yeah, either way, Blastoise VMAX, Venusaur VMAX, 2 cards that have never seen love in the TCG, could finally pop up. I mean, there's potential in both of these cards. They're pretty strong. Grand Falls is sort of what you're doing with Trinity Nova, except it's just kind of a finisher move to set up another attacker. It's not really anything too special. Gmax Bombard doing 30 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. Unfortunately, this set will see the return of Manaphy as well as Arceus, so Manaphy being a bench barrier protection. So maybe Gmax Bombard is not where it's at, but it's still a water type in weakness on fire types. Always good to know. Venusaur VMAX then comes in with a Forest Storm. Now I said Flower Storm, but it's Forest Storm. That does 30 damage for each grass energy attached to all your Pokemon. I think Venusaur might be a pretty underrated deck. Obviously, you got the weakness to fire, which is pretty brutal. But you do have Gmax Bloom that does 210, you heal 30 damage. Doesn't seem that strong, but we do have ways of like healing more damage. We have Cook, we have like Indeedee V that you can put on the bench and heal 20 every turn. You have Celebi VMAX if you really wanted to. So I think there's like a lot of reasons to at least consider Venusaur VMAX. And of course, mentioned earlier with Delmise, there's the hitting for weakness on, Darkrai in the future. So we'll have to see if fire types are really that strong, but it could affect how good these decks are. So moving into Rogue tier, these are like just cheaper variants of stronger decks and can fill niche categories such as Colossal VMAX getting a 1-hit on Arceus with a belt if you land the Eruption Shot, and then Mali VMAX and Grimmsnarl hitting weakness on Mew, so these are just like cheaper versions of Moltres. And then Flareon actually having double turbo synergy, which is really cool. So these are just like meme decks. These are more like roguish meme decks that you can like build cheaply as long as you have a couple of Arceus. Yeah, Arceus might not be like the cheapest thing ever, but at least if you can get Arceus and you're like trying to build up to a better version of it, you can, build one of these variants and it'll be a lot cheaper. So I do kind of like the idea of playing some of these. I know that Grimmsnarl has had like meh success in the past with cards like Hydreigon to power it up. Well, now you can use Trinity Nova. Cramorant in a similar position, Bolton VMAX, not really doing anything, but still it's probably like the best thing to play it with. Trevenant VMAX isn't really doing anything. It's just an excuse to play Trev because I really wanted Trevenant to be good, even though the card was terrible. So there's just like all of these are like pretty bad in their own way, but this is like an excuse to play those cards that are kind of just sitting around collecting dust. You're bored one Saturday and you want a deck to play that's, not in the meta strictly, then this is probably the best way of doing it. And there's definitely some plus sides. Hitting weakness on some of the better decks and formats will definitely help out. So yeah, should be pretty good. And then lastly, we have the Believers tier. This will conclude the video right here. But V Union, being a bit awkward, can't really power them up terribly well. However, Trinity Nova comes along and says, yeah, well, we can charge 3 energy up to these guys. And we have Starbirth as an additional card in that deck that will allow you to search your deck, well, additional ability, I should say. That'll allow you to search your deck for any 2 cards, so you can find like V Union pieces. You can find Ultra Ball, so you can like use Ultra Ball to discard other pieces and stuff. And yeah, it just seems like probably the best time to play V Unions if you ever want to make any of them work. I'm not sure if any of them are competitively viable in like top tier though. I think if any of them are going to be viable, it's probably Mewtwo actually. There's something about Mewtwo's final burn move doing 300 for 4 is actually really absurd and really good. And then Psy Explosion doing 160 spread, knocking out multiple Drizzles and stuff. So I could see Mewtwo being the best. Greninja, Twister Shuriken's amazing, doing 100 to every of each of like your opponent's Pokemon. But then it has like the downside of Manaphy coming back. And then Zacian has to discard energy after using Master Blade. So, bit unfortunate, but either way, this is kind of like the Believers tier. I think out of all these tier lists, I'm like most interested personally, like if just on a personal judgment, in playing like tier 3 decks. Cards like Delmise and Gengar I think could actually be really strong with Arceus. Similar story with something like Colossal could actually be a lot of fun, where use Starbirth to like search your deck for stone fighting energy and stuff like that. I think there's like a lot of cool combos. And then Grimmsnarl's like the best way to play it with Arceus now, so definitely some cool cards. Let me know what you think down below. Is there something I missed out? Is there a card I missed? Is there some synergy you'd like to see with Control? And yeah, just let me know what you think down below. And this has been Empower, and I hope you enjoyed today's video.